Chapter 19. This is from the official NASA Procedures for Contact with Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life Manual, Alien Abductions. Although the idea of being abducted from Earth by IEL is most likely the fantasy of Hollywood movies, it cannot be ruled out completely. There is a chance, however slight, that the first contact with IEL will be via humans who have been physically removed from Earth. Therefore, anyone you encounter who claims to have been the victim of an alien abduction must be taken seriously unless proven otherwise. They ought to be quarantined, closely examined, and carefully interviewed to assess the veracity of their story. If you happen to be the one who is abducted, be gracious and accommodating to your hosts. Try to remember everything you can and contact DEXA immediately upon your return to Earth. Face Off. Lunar Day 252, T-minus 11 hours to evacuation. It took another 2.5 hours to repair the base oxygen system and another 30 minutes to confirm that it was safe to allow everybody back inside MBA once again. During that time, we had little to do but wait on the lunar surface. Since more than half of my oxygen was gone, I didn't want to exert myself too much and burn through the rest of it. I also didn't want to turn my back on anyone. Dr. Balnikoff was keeping a very close eye on Lily Schoberg, but that didn't mean that someone else might not take a crack at me. Lars was one of the few Moonies who hadn't witnessed at least some of Lily's attack on me. Most everyone had missed the beginning of it, where she unplugged my oxygen hose, but they had seen what the fight had devolved into. However, Lars had been on the other side of the base. In his haste to evacuate MBA, he had abandoned his own children and raced off to the emergency backup airlock. Now, Lars tracked me down and spent much of our remaining time on the lunar surface shouting at me. I thought he might have been accusing me of starting the fight and of possibly even trying to kill Lily, but I didn't know for sure because I switched off my radio 3 seconds into his tirade so I didn't have to listen to him. Lars didn't notice. Instead, he continued gesticulating angrily for another hour until he had screamed so much that his own oxygen supply dropped to dangerous levels and he had to stay silent simply to keep from asphyxiating. To conserve my own energy, I sat by the airlock door. It occurred to me that I was squandering some of the last precious time I had on the lunar surface, and that I should have been off exploring the moon, or at least enjoying the feel of wandering around on a foreign celestial body while I still could do it. But I was too exhausted, physically and mentally. It had been a very long day, and frankly, there wasn't too much to see around MBA anyhow. It was the one part of the entire lunar surface that had been polluted by humans, and thus it looked more like an industrial wasteland than a pristine moonscape. Meanwhile, Kira and Violet were relishing every moment of their time outside. If Violet was upset at all by our ordeal, she didn't show it. But then Violet hadn't been out of MBA since we'd arrived, and so it was possible that the excitement of this trumped any other emotions. First, the girls made history by being the first humans to do cartwheels on the moon, and then they attempted several other gymnastic moves as well, with varying results. After that, they tromped off to a nearby patch of virgin moon dust and made the first human footprints there. I thought about radioing them and telling them to stay close to base, but I could still keep an eye on them from where I was, and I figured Violet deserved some fun after our near-death experience. Once we were given the all-clear to come back inside, I was allowed to enter first due to my depleted oxygen supply. The other kids, Violet, Kamoze, Inez, Kira, Roddy, and Cesar, were also given priority status. After a normal trip onto the surface, we would have spent at least 15 minutes in the airlock trying to vacuum the moon dust off our suits before returning them to storage. However, there were too many other people waiting to come in behind us. Plus, keeping MBA free of moon dust wasn't such a big priority anymore, seeing as half of us were scheduled to evacuate the next day. So we passed through the airlock as quickly as possible, and then removed our suits in the staging area instead, getting moon dust all over the nice, sterile moon base floor. Mom was waiting for us anxiously in the staging area. She had heard almost immediately over the radio that Lily Schoberg had tried to kill Violet and me, but she hadn't been able to come to comfort us because of the urgency of the repair work on the oxygen system. Now she looked exhausted and racked by guilt. She wrapped her arms around both of us tightly and sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry."
"Why are you sorry?" Violet asked innocently. "You didn't do anything. Lily Schoberg did."
"I'm sorry you had to go through that at all," Mom explained.
"We weren't in that much danger," Violet said reassuringly. "Well, Dash kind of was, but I saved him."
"You did," I said, tousling her hair. Violet then told Mom everything that had happened. Now, in truth, I knew Violet had been a lot more scared than she was letting on. When she got frightened, she had a habit of overstating her bravery. On our rocket to the moon, she had been so scared during liftoff that her hands had gone cold, but she later insisted that she hadn't been scared one bit and that the ride had been 100 times better than any roller coaster on Earth. While she chatted to Mom, I noticed Cesar Marquez close by, trying to figure out how to unlatch his helmet from his suit. I wandered over to him. "Thanks for helping Violet out there." Cesar shrugged. "I saw somebody picking on a kid and I thought it wasn't cool. I had no idea it was Lily. I figured it was some psycho like Patton or Dr. Goldstein." "Dr. Goldstein?" I repeated, surprised by this accusation. "Yeah, she's so weird. She's always like working with plants." "Well, she is a botanist." "Yeah, but she talks to them." "A lot of people do that, and it especially makes sense here. It gives them carbon dioxide." "Carbon what?" Kazar said dully. It's what plants take in to make oxygen." "Whatever," Cesar said, already seeming bored by the conversation. "I still can't believe it was Lily." Ugh, he shuddered. "I can't believe I fought a girl." He tried to yank his helmet off without unlatching it first, which was impossible. "I can help you with that," I said, reaching toward him. "I could do it fine by myself," Cesar said curtly, even though he couldn't. It seemed that the whole idea of fighting Lily had put him on edge, or maybe he was upset to find out that Lily had tried to kill someone. After all, she and Cesar had spent a lot of time together at MBA. Cesar stormed away from me, straining against his own helmet, oblivious to the hatch that was still connecting it to his spacesuit. When he couldn't get it off, he angrily pounded it with his fists.
"Wow," Violet said, coming over to me. "How did someone as smart as his mother ever have someone as dumb as him?"
"Be nice," I said, more for Mom's benefit than for Violet's. "He saved our lives out there."
"He's still a moron,"
Violet said, and I noticed that Mom didn't correct her. The next batch of Moonies poured into the airlock from the lunar surface. Within 15 minutes, everyone was back inside MBA, safe and sound, and I found myself in Nina's office, having an emergency meeting with my parents, the Schobergs, Dr. Balnikoff, and Chang. Dr. Merritt agreed to look after Violet and took her to the mess to get space ice cream. It was a meeting I'd been dreading the entire time on the lunar surface, but I knew it was one that we had to have. The fact that Lily had attacked me needed to be dealt with immediately. The meeting was called in Nina's residence with the intent of keeping it secret. But of course, anyone who wanted to, like Kira, could hear everything that was said by standing on the catwalk outside and listening through the door. There weren't enough inflaticubes for everyone, so we all just stood there awkwardly. The moment the Schobergs came through the door, Lars started yelling at the rest of us. His voice was still hoarse from all the yelling he'd done at me out on the surface, but that didn't stop him. "Lily didn't attack anyone," he declared. "She was acting in self-defense." "By all accounts, that does not appear to be true," Nina said coldly.
"It is!" Lily exclaimed. "I was minding my own business when the Gibsons attacked me."
"Yeah, that's right," Patton agreed, lamely trying to back up his sister. "I saw the whole thing. Dash and Violet just jumped her." Now, these were such bald-faced lies that even Lars couldn't bring himself to agree with them. Instead, he shot his children a withering look, apparently annoyed at them for pushing things too far. Nina gave the Schoberg twins a withering look of her own. Both instantly fell silent. "I have already examined the security footage from the cameras mounted outside," Nina said. "It is clear that Lily attacked first and without provocation. Furthermore, I have reviewed the radio transmissions from right before the assault. It appears that Lily was eavesdropping on the conversation between Dashiell and Violet. Dashiell was about to reveal that Lily was behind the murder attempt on her father, so Lily attacked him to keep him quiet. Now, this provoked a variety of reactions around the room. Most of the adults seemed stunned by the accusation, although Lars and Sonia were particularly mortified. Meanwhile, Lily turned even paler than usual while Patton gaped in astonishment. "You tried to kill Daddy?" he accused. I didn't, Lily gasped. Patton didn't seem to believe her, but then he didn't seem to be upset with her either. Instead, he burst into a fit of hysterical laughter, as if his sister trying to kill his father was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "I wasn't about to accuse Lily," I announced, trying to be heard. "She's not the one who poisoned Lars." Patton stopped laughing. "She's not?" "No," I said. "She was only trying to protect the person who did poison him." Now everyone's attention shifted toward me. "So who did it?" Mom asked. "Lars Sjoberg poisoned himself," I said. This produced a whole new round of shocked, stunned, and astonished reactions. And for a moment, Lars Sjoberg looked like he'd swallowed a whole bag of human excrement. And then he recovered and started shouting again. "That's a lie!" he yelled, jabbing a finger at me. "That boy's a menace. He simply cannot be trusted." "I trust him," Nina said. And this caught me off guard, as it was the closest thing to a compliment I had ever received from Nina. In fact, it might have been the closest thing to a compliment anyone had ever received from Nina. And I'm going to listen to what he has to say. If you don't want to stay here for it, you're free to leave. "But," Lars began. "On the other hand," Nina told him, "if you do choose to stay for it, then I expect that you will keep your mouth shut and not make a scene for once in your life. And if you can't do that, then I will have Dr. Kowalski and Dr. Balnikov forcibly escort you from the room." Lars fell silent, although he was obviously still enraged. I half expected to see steam pouring from his ears. Chang smiled. He seemed excited by the prospect of getting to forcibly escort Lars out. Nina looked back to me. "Please, Dashiell, tell me how you arrived at this conclusion." Everyone's attention returned to me. I took a step back, uncomfortable with being on the spot and wondering if I was right. But then I looked to my parents, who smiled at me reassuringly, giving me confidence. "I figured it like this," I said. "If someone was actually looking to kill Lars, they didn't do it right. They didn't put enough poison in the lutefisk, even though there was poison left over in the syringe. That was a dumb mistake. But this base is full of very smart people. They wouldn't have made a mistake like that. In fact, I'm sure pretty much everyone here could have come up with a better way to kill Lars than poisoning his lutefisk. A way that wouldn't have left any evidence behind, maybe. Instead, the killer botched the job, which doesn't make sense, unless they were trying to botch the job. The craziest thing about this crime is that nearly everyone here at MBA was a suspect. Almost everyone had a good reason for wanting Lars dead. But I could only think of one person who would want Lars sort of dead. "Why are we even listening to this?" Lars exploded. "This is utter nonsense. Why would I want to be sort of dead?" "Because you wanted all of us to think someone was trying to kill you," I said. "But you didn't actually want to die." "Of all the idiotic things I've ever heard," Lars said, "this has to be the dumbest." "Gentlemen," Nina said to Chang and Dr. Balnikov, "please escort Lars out." "It'd be my pleasure," Chang said happily, and he and Dr. Balnikov seized Lars by the arms. Now, even though Lars was a big man, he was no match for the both of them. "All right," he cried as they dragged him toward the door. "You win! I'll be silent." Chang and Dr. Balnikov looked back at Nina, waiting for orders. "Let's give him one more chance," she said, and then glared at Lars. "One more word, and we finish this without you." Lars nodded meekly. Chang and Dr. Balnikov didn't toss him out the door, but they both kept vice grips on his arms. Dad looked to me. "Why would Lars want us to think someone had tried to kill him?" "So he could go home," I said. He definitely hasn't been happy up here, but NASA hasn't been able to find a spot for him or his family on any of the rockets back to Earth. Mom piped up, realizing where I was going with this. But if there's a threat to his life, NASA protocols mandate sending a rocket, no matter the cost. Everyone now looked to Lars, aware that this made a twisted sort of sense. Lars didn't give anything away, though. He just glared angrily at Nina. Dr. Balnikov looked at Lars curiously. You were willing to poison yourself to get a rocket home? Lars stubbornly refused to answer. It could work two ways, I explained. Either it would create a medical emergency for Lars without killing him, or he could claim that his life would be in jeopardy if he stayed here. I actually overheard Sonia claiming to Nina that same thing this morning. That wasn't a plot, Sonia argued. Her broken nose was still swollen, but she had regained her ability to talk properly. I was legitimately worried for my husband. Oh, I doubt that, Dr. Balnikov grumbled. You were just looking for an excuse to get back home. Well, either way, she had a valid argument, I said. Lars was counting on that when he poisoned himself. So this was only about getting off the moon, Chang asked, not about framing me for murder. I think framing you is kind of a bonus, I said. Lars thought he could go back and send you to jail. Now, this didn't seem to surprise everyone nearly as much as some of my other revelations had. Everyone knew Lars had a serious grudge against Chang. Lars stole the apple seeds from the greenhouse a while ago, I went on. He could have made the cyanide at any time. He's definitely smart enough to have figured out how to do that, but he waited for just the right moment to poison himself. He didn't do it on any random night. He did it on a night when he knew Chang had already been sneaking into the mess hall. Well, how did he know that? Mom asked. The Schoberg's room is directly over Chang's room, I explained, and I realized today that you can see through the greenhouse into the mess hall from Chang's door, which means there should be a similar view from the Schobergs. The walls are so thin here, I'm sure the Schobergs could hear Chang leaving his room at night. Any one of them could have simply opened the door a bit and watched him enter the mess hall. And once they saw him go into the storage unit that held the lutefisk, they knew the time was right to set him up. Why was Chang getting lutefisk? Dad asked. He wasn't, I replied. He was getting Rasselnik. Rasselnik? Dad repeated, confused. It's a pickle and kidney soup, I said. It's some kind of Russian delicacy. Oh, Mom said, and then looked to Dad with understanding. It seemed that both of them already knew about Chang and Dr. Balnikov. Pickles and kidneys? Pat Schoberg cringed in disgust. Buh, that sounds horrible. It is a lot better than your horrid lutefisk, Dr. Balnikov said defensively. I never said lutefisk was good, Patton shot back. I think it tastes like cat pee. Nina stepped in before the discussion could get out of hand. There's no point in arguing which culture has the worst food here, she looked to me. You think Lars poisoned himself last night because he saw the opportunity to frame Chang? Right, I agreed. He, or someone else in his family, saw Chang fiddling around in the food storage and realized that the time was right. So Lars waited a few hours, then went down to the storage area, got some lutefisk out, and returned to his room to poison himself with it, which explains why he was eating lutefisk in the middle of the night, instead of during normal waking hours. Lots of people snack in the middle of the night, Sonia Schoberg said protectively. Maybe, Chang said, but very few of them snack on lutefisk. That's just weird. You should talk, Sonia howled. You were getting pickle and kidney soup in the middle of the night. Anyhow, I said, it was all done to set Chang up. I turned to Nina. This morning you told me that there wasn't any point in going through the video footage to see if anybody had poisoned the lutefisk. But then later on you said that you changed your mind. What made you do that? Nina looked surprised to be put on the spot like this. I'm allowed to change my mind, Mom asked. In the middle of preparing for an emergency evacuation, you suddenly decided to take the time to go through last night's security footage? Nina wavered for a moment and then said, I got an anonymous tip. Someone slipped a note under my door suggesting that I check the footage from midnight to 1 a.m. And you didn't think that was suspicious? Chang asked. On Earth, the police get anonymous tips all the time, Nina countered. I'm guessing this one came from Lars Schoberg, I said, or maybe Lily delivered it for him. And then, to seal the deal, one of them planted the syringe with cyanide in Chang's room. But Chang's door was locked, Mom argued, and then looked at Chang. Wasn't it? The security protocols in this place are crap, Chang said. Anyone with half a brain can override the door locks. The override is built into the system in case Nina ever needs to do it. And Lars knows his way around a computer system. He's fiddled with the one here before. He might be a pig, but he's not an idiot. Lars bridled at this, but he remained silent. It was obviously getting hard for him to stay silent, though. With Chang's latest needling, he began to tremble with rage. Dad returned his attention to me. Why do you think Lily was involved? Why not just Lars? Because Lily must have known what Lars was up to all along, I said, and she knew Nina was having me investigate. So she eavesdropped on Violet and me out on the lunar surface, and when I started to say who the real killer was, she tried to kill me herself to keep it quiet. Then what's to say Lily wasn't the only killer all along? Dr. Balnikov asked. What? Lily gasped. Everything that has been mentioned. She could have done on her own, Dr. Balnikov said. Watching Chang at Raselnik, tipping off Nina, planting syringe. And we know she tried to kill 2 people, Dashiell and Violet. So maybe this all started because she tried to kill her father first, and she simply got the amount of poison wrong. Everything else she has done to protect herself. I hadn't thought of that. The adults all paused to consider that as well, and rattled, Lily looked to her father. It seemed to me that she was expecting him to come to her defense. He didn't. Instead, he lowered his eyes to the floor. Lily instantly flooded with rage. You don't have anything to say to that? She demanded. Finally, Lars spoke. It seems possible, he said. Lily went ballistic. How dare you? She screamed. After all I've done for you, you're going to throw me to the wolves? And to everyone's surprise, she launched herself across the room at Lars, seized him by the neck, and started choking him. Chang and Dr. Balnikov had to let go of Lars and direct their attention to prying his own daughter off of him. Only Lily turned out to be stronger than they expected. Despite their best efforts, her hands remained firmly clamped around Lars's neck, and she shook him angrily, screaming at him in Swedish. Lars's eyes bugged out as his own daughter choked him. His pale flesh quickly purpled. Most of the other adults leaped into action to separate Lars and his daughter. Only Sonia appeared unsure of what to do. She looked back and forth between both family members, torn as to who to help. Patton leaned against the wall, laughing hysterically, enjoying the show. Everyone finally managed to pull Lily off Lars. Lars stumbled backward, gasping for air. It was her all along, he told all of us. My own daughter! Lily pleaded her case to the rest of us simultaneously. It was him! He wanted to frame Chang, and when I caught him doing it, he forced me to help him. He said he'd cut me out of his will if I didn't. Those are lies, Lars argued. We've always known that Lily had a homicidal streak, but we can no longer protect her. You have seen for yourself just how dangerous she is. You low-down dirty snake! Lily screeched and then launched herself at him again. This time, Chang and Dr. Balnikov intercepted her, but she still struggled against them, determined to throttle her father. I didn't try to kill you before, but I obviously should have. What type of monster poisons himself and then lets his own daughter take the fall for it? What type of daughter tries to kill her own father and then claims that he did it himself? Lars retorted. Stop it, Sonia wailed. Stop it right now! Her words were so shrill and desperate that everyone obeyed, no matter what they were doing. Even Lars and Lily froze in the midst of their fight. Sonia apparently couldn't take this anymore. She was quivering in anger. Slowly, she raised an accusing finger and pointed it at her husband. You have done a lot of terrible things in your life, and I have stood by you, but not this time. Not now. I don't care if you take all my money away. I am not going to let you do this to our daughter. Sonia, please, Lars pleaded. No, Sonia shouted. Enough is enough. She looked to all the rest of us. Lars isn't well. He has spent the last few weeks here plotting and brooding, determined to do anything he could to get us off this stupid moon. Sonia, Lars said, angrier now. I told him this would never work, Sonia commented, but there was no talking him out of it. Being trapped up here is driving him crazy, so I let him go ahead with it. But I never expected it would come to this, to accusing his own daughter of murder just to save his own pathetic skin. Lily never tried to kill anyone. Except me and Violet, I said. Sonia ignored this, as though it wasn't that important. She glared at Lars. Lily's innocent. This is all her father's doing. Sonia! Lars bellowed. Unable to hold his tongue any longer, he started shouting at her in Swedish. Sonia shouted right back at him, and then Lily joined in for good measure. Swedish is a very guttural language, and so three people yelling at one another in it sounded like a room full of geese trying to hawk up phlegm. Patton sat on an inflated cube and watched. He seemed to be having the best day of his life. And it occurred to me that there was an irony to all of this. Lars had gone through so much trouble to get off the base, unaware that steps were already underway for everyone to evacuate. If he'd only waited another day, he would have found out that this whole plot was unnecessary. Dad came over to me and put an arm around my shoulder. Come on, he said. I think our work here is done. I do too, Mom said, and we started for the door. Wait, Nina yelled after us. Where are you going? Dad said. You forced my son to help solve this crime, and he solved it. It's your job to deal with the aftermath. Nina shifted her gaze from us to the shouting Schobergs. She didn't look happy to have them all in her office. Don't worry, Chang told Nina. Victor and I will be happy to help you take care of these idiots. He cracked his knuckles and smiled like he was hoping Nina might ask him to knock some heads together. My parents and I stepped out onto the catwalk and shut the door behind us. Most of the other Moonies were gathered in the staging area below us. Since we could all clearly hear the Schobergs arguing through the thin walls, it seemed that everyone else had a very good idea of what had happened in Nina's office. Meanwhile, Kira and Violet were right outside the door. Violet had chocolate ice cream smeared all around her face, and Daphne stood nearby, looking a bit embarrassed. Obviously, they had all been eavesdropping.
Is it true, Violet asked, that Lars poisoned himself?
Looks that way, Dad replied.
Why would he do that?
Violet asked. Well, he was trying to manipulate NASA into getting him off the moon faster, Dad explained, and to frame Chang for doing it. It's a shame he didn't get the dose wrong and off himself for good, Dr. Janke said, and a lot of the other Moonies echoed agreement. We'll be free of the Schobergs soon enough, Mom told the crowd, and then she turned her attention to me. You still have a few hours of your birthday left, Dash. Is there anything special you'd like to do? Yeah, I said. After my exceptionally long day, there was only one thing I could think of. More than anything else in the whole world, I want to go to sleep.